Welcome. Welcome to another episode of The Impact of AI, sponsored by AI Time Journal and supported by women leaders in data and artificial intelligence. Each week, we explore how AI and cognitive technologies impact us daily, both professionally and personally. For those of you whom I've not met, my name is Melissa Drew, and I will be your host on this week's episode. This week, we are delighted because we were able to coordinate all of our calendars successfully, and we have Dara Meath. She is the current CIO for Conair. Dara has a long history as being a technology leader in digital and e-commerce. She's a speaker, well-known speaker, just recently spoke at AI Summit, author, owner, and board member. Welcome, Dara.
Well, thank you so much, Melissa, for having me.
This is going to be a really, really good episode today. Now, Dara, we noticed that no one's career path lately has always been straight and narrow. With the nuances and the quickness of how technology changes in our global landscape, pretty much where you started out in your career is not necessarily where you end. And what's notable is on your LinkedIn page, you had an early interest in anthropology at the University of Pennsylvania, and then moved into business administration, management, and law. At some point, you moved into becoming a board member. You're actually a board member on multiple areas in multiple sectors. And I'd love to know what the story is.
Sure. I love this question because it's so true. I think, when we're younger, we dream about 500 different careers we could have. And I think actually at this stage of my life, I still dream about that in some ways, because I just feel like the way that we kind of come up through our careers, we get an opportunity, or I did, to touch upon a lot of different aspects of what I could do and what I was interested in. So when I was out and I was looking at archaeology and anthropology, and I was researching and putting structures together, I realized that equates a lot to what we do today in the DNA of putting things together only on a virtual platform versus an actual physical landscape of life. So through my career, when I started going into business, I realized that I had a really keen interest over on the technology space, and started to really put together different ways that businesses could use technology in order to build out their data, the way that people were architecting and inputting data, and using that in order to drive their business. And so I took all of those different aspects of the career and still stem back from anthropology, which I love, and really started to build the DNA of how I was going to look at the way technology was going to work within my space. And so I had the distinct pleasure through my career of looking at applications inside and out, and building them and coding them and working with them to the degree where I saw them successful in businesses, and including the one that I was working in. And then also looking at the aspects of how things around it touch. So I worked a lot in infrastructure, hardware, network, securities. And so I had this, what I like to call, and I refer to a Medusa head quite frequently. It's like a Medusa head concept, right? So there's these cores of building things in, and then all these pieces come around it and build together. And so that's how I kind of landscaped how the career was set off and set forth. And since that stage, within a particular business, I knew that I still had the abilities to give extra strength into other businesses. So I've taken the opportunity now to take some of that knowledge and background, and not only give that out to businesses through the board's opportunities that I've had, but also to learn from them as well. So I'm keep educating and developing the skills as everyday technology changes.
If we take all of that you've accumulated and really, you use the word DNA, the spinning all of those skill sets and everything together into what you do today, how does that affect your role as CIO at Conair?
It's a great question. I think it positively affects the role. We particularly have within this specific position, we happen to have a lot of the structure underneath it. And so we are not a company that has different C-suites that sit in the technology space. And so each one of those different opportunities that roll up underneath me are ones that I'm familiar with and can strengthen and help build with the long line of prospects and businesses I've done. and education, right?
Mhm.
And so I have cyber that rolls up into this infrastructure, right? We have all of the e-com and digital that rolls up into this infrastructure. We have all of what we have in the network and hardware, all roll up into one. Now, some companies think that that's a little bit overhead hard, right? Because sometimes there's a good way of separating those out and having individual unique skills for those. I happen to be very passionate about each one of them and give equality to each one. And so it allows me to keep growing. And so I have great levels underneath that understand and can keep building themselves. And then one day, as we continue to grow, we may have the opportunity to split that out. But for today, I think we're very prosperous and able to give a lot of positive effects to the business as I think very openly about each one of those different job roles.
I was thinking while you were talking, we're all of these companies are, that we've talked to in the past, whether we've interviewed them on this podcast or not, but everyone is moving towards how can we be more competitive in this new era of cognitive technologies and artificial intelligence. And it would be interesting to understand how you, as your CIO, what are you doing to move in that direction?
Yeah. So for our company, we're extremely successful business, over a 50-year history, which is fantastic. About really connecting and communicating with our businesses as well as our consumers. And so for us to keep staying successful, we needed to find new avenues and continue to find avenues of that communication. And then to understand how our product affects them in a positive way. And so in doing that, AI plays a big part of that as we continue to grow our, learning space, our, NPL, which is our natural languages to learn about what our consumers are really looking from us, and then to spin that into a positive result of bringing better products to the future. On the internal side of it, to stay successful, we've used a lot of that same technique in order to drive the way that we can work with our internal teams and our internal customers, as we would say, from a technology space, so that they can stay successful in their roles. And so we allow different ways of splitting this out into our support desk systems so that people are really self-sufficient for the future. And it's a growing pod for that. We're putting that into our applications and our technology space for there. And then, of course, in all of our structure and reporting, because you're only as good as your data that's coming back out. And so for us, we put a lot of efficiencies for our future where our data is actually going to align and speak more for what the business needs, and more for our focus internally. And so we put a lot around those types of distinctions as we continue to grow and learn from that and educate ourselves about that, which is the key, right? Internally, you're as good as your products, but you're only as good as the people that are running the products to be successful. And so we put a lot of initiatives around training and developing and growing internally. And of course, if we need experts from the outside, we partner up or we bring in someone, but we certainly grow our talent inside so that they can keep growing for our future. And that's made us more successful as we landscape this space.
I recently read an article online last week that said within the retail CPG area that more companies were folding in that AI technologies. But when it looked at the percentage of, am I putting more of that in the direct product to the consumer versus am I doing more of that on the back end? And in your response a moment ago, you mentioned kind of both. Are you guys equally putting that AI in both areas, or do you find that you're doing more back office, intelligent technology versus, direct to the consumer products?
So that's a great question. We're actually doing both. I would say our percentage on the back end, because again, we're like a lot of companies, right? We're still newer into this game, right? We're not a tech company first. I would love to believe we were a tech company first. I want to be a tech company first, right? But that's just not the realization. But there is so much technology that's touched every day. And so it really becomes just a part of natural business.
Yeah.
For us, we've put a lot into the back end because right now, when I look at the way that I can keep growing the efficiencies and the support of the business, And I have an amazing technology team. They are just incredible, the best talent that you could offer, but they need education and development. So before you can keep bringing it to the consumer, you actually have to understand it internally first, right? And then when you bring it to the consumer, it's what touch points do you want to do? It could be from our e-com sites, which I have a distinct pleasure of leading a lot of them now. In the future, we're doing a lot within the transformation of technology for understanding and engaging with the consumer. And then from there, we'll take that back and really help to spin off how we can be more self-sufficient, help them to guide better and have a better customer experience with us. But on the hardware side of it, when we look at where we're putting technology in for our consumers, we're also looking at it in a way of building out some of our consumer goods. As we look at the landscape of some of our products, right, they are very technology-driven products that are used in the home, on your hair, in professional spaces, like our B2B businesses are using them in hotels and restaurants, whether it's the wearing product or whether it's Cuisinart, Leandro, Conair, whatever those product lines are, they do take a lot of technology within them. And so we are in the future looking at ways that we can use AI built into that technology to help that product help drive further of what the consumer wants. So it could be, for example, one of our greatest lines is Babyliss Pro. Babyliss Pro is a very forefront line, and it's a professional business that's actually become a B2C successful business because it's got some of the most beautiful product lines for hair that and Barbary tools that you would want. And those tools are very sophisticated. They have a lot of technology pieces that are built inside of them. And one of them are really interesting because they have their own nuances, right? It could be there's a cooling factor to it. It could be that there's a heat element to it. Some of them have Ferrari engines in them. And so when we look at that, there are ways to use that to help with sensories, with self-care, with ways of people that in the future want to do tricks for themselves for Barbary. And so right now, today, what we offer are things like 3D apps. And growing those 3D apps are AR. So right now we're building an AR technology so that people can start seeing the ways that they can use these different devices to connect them. And as we do that, AI will be landscaped into it to keep growing those sources.
And AR in this reference is augmented reality.
That is correct.
Wow. Wow. I don't think I would have ever connected the dots to pull in augmented reality with hair care. I think that's quite, I mean, not only is that very progressive, but I think it's quite innovative. Like it's on the edge of innovation. That's fantastic.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I mean, it's funny. 2 years ago when I came on, there was this concept of, okay, we got to get our e-com up and running. And then suddenly this division came to me, and the president of the division, Alan Stockman's just a brilliant guy. And he's very like, let's go for technology. Let's figure out a way. And he said to me, we want to produce this item that's going to be very custom driven, and we need to be able to relate and get it out so that people can build their own tools, right? So they took a trimmer and a clipper at first, and I'm very unfamiliar with that. I don't quickly have a beard right now. So I'm like, what do we do? So I took a lot of time to understand their consumers and talk with their barbers and understand what they were looking for, and then talk with their team a lot to say, what are you trying to drive for? And then, famous as I am, I drew some stick figures on a board and said, I want to build you this 3D app that I'm eventually going to grow into this AR effect and all. And they said, I have no idea what your stick figures show. I think they're incredible, but get us to a point. And so when we first did the app, we really thought, okay, this is a great point to put one product on. So we did it with a clipper, did the app. Within hours, they were selling out a product. It was a huge success. One, because it was something new where they could play with it and work with it and really have fun spinning and playing with tools. Two was because the industry was really driving for an app. They are very mobile driven in industry. And so I listened and heard what type of things that would work for them. Right. And then three is because social media is a driving factor in how to make success on some of these things. And the minute we started to say, by the way, we have this really cool technology that we're continuing to grow, people were interested in driving with us. So there was a lot of factors around it. Now, I'm not sure that will work for every industry we have, right?
Mhm.
There are definitely brands that are underneath in a portfolio that say 3D might not be the right way to go. And so you have to listen to what the businesses are looking for and help them to be able to drive that success and understand, where you need to partner and where you need to give advice and then where you need to say, it's probably not right. Let's go for something else.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I love stories. That's great. Thank you so much. I would be interested. Now I'm going to follow this a little bit more closely on the retail side and see where you guys start pushing out some more AR now that you've highlighted that here.
100%. Yeah, please do.
Absolutely.
These are the ways to make things very unique for consumers.
Right.
Nowadays, you have to come up with different things that consumers are going to find you and be interested in you and stick with you, right? And if you're not trying to change your voice in the right way,
Mhm.
they're going to lose interest. And then people always ask me, right? How do you drive up against someone who's like Amazon, right?
Mhm.
Nobody can. What you can do though is give a different kind of experience. And that's what people can use AI for, is to use tools and techniques and experiences that they can't get somewhere else to understand their consumer better and to understand their product better and to keep driving it.
For those listening to this on audio podcast, I'm smiling and grinning ear to ear because earlier this year in 2021, someone asked me if I could define the difference between what a CTO does, Chief Technology Officer, versus a CIO. What is the differentiating factor? And the one thing I came up with was, well, in reality, the Chief Technology Officer is managing the present of what technology is doing and how to operationalize that. But the CIO, the Chief Information Officer, is the forward thinking, innovative individual that is constantly looking to bring in new things into the organization and then collaborate with your CEO, your CTO, and the other C-suites. And you're the first person that's verbally communicated what I feel is the difference between the two roles. So that's why I'm over here just grinning.
Fantastic. Well, I'm
Yeah.
glad I could do that.
Yeah.
And I love that we can also add in a little piece of that CDO, right? Which is such a huge factor, whether you're a chief data officer, a chief digital officer, whatever that landscape is, it's just so much combined into one. So I'm glad I could do that.
Yeah, which just mentioned the chief data officer, and I'd like to maybe shift a little. We've focused on. I wrote this down. The CIO, you're over e-commerce, networking, hardware, cyber. But where does that? In some organizations, there are strictly separate roles for a chief data officer, a chief analytics officer. But you've mentioned a lot of the e-commerce and the data and the marketing folds under you as well. Should we assume that all of that data and analytics is also folding in there as well? Okay.
Yeah, they all fold into the same technology space. And again, as I mentioned, there are a lot of companies that have split that out, right?
Right.
And I think that there's a lot of sense to that. We happen to be a company that really relies on all of the great teams that we have to
Mhm.
kind of work together. And I just happen to have a chance to steer some of that, right? And that may not be the landscape if we ever become double what we are today, or things might change. But for us, it works. And I think, again, when I came into the role, I'm a very different type of officer, right?
Yes.
Whatever you want to define that as. I constantly love technology. I mean, I couldn't say how much I read about it or speak about it or work within it. I'm also a very core user. I mean, today I was doing some development, I was doing some programming around it. There are a lot to that. At the same time, I'll go out and wireframe a site because, hey, I think my vision's going to be one that we could start with and then someone could take it over, right?
Mhm.
So I'm very hands-on. And I think if you are, right, there's a lot that you get an opportunity to be able to support and help with. Data is a critical role within any company today. I have an absolute pleasure of working in data every day today and driving some of the success of the reporting that we're getting out of that. There's a lot more to do. And as we continue to move forward in our company, our goal is to get data more into the hands of every user out there, and less canned and more right rhythm for what they need. And today, we have a hybrid effect going, and that will continue probably for the lifetime of me being at any company, is because data is constantly changing, and the needs of what data is constantly changing. And so we're taking today all of our, front end consumer data from the customers and bringing it in and building that in through our infrastructure of our ERP, and then settling out our data points. We're bringing it then into our BI tools, using those analytics and figuring out how to landscape those proposed moments. But what we're doing in the future is bringing the data across all different points, including the B2C business, which we didn't have an opportunity before, and really bringing all those data points together and saying, okay, now here's one vision of who the consumer is. They've probably bought with brand A and brand B, but we didn't tap into it because we didn't have those pieces together before. And so the way that we're driving it really makes sense. And the way that I look at it is I have the opportunity to take the applications that are supporting it, the data points that are supporting it, and then add any load I might have to as far as network if needed, or cloud if needed, right? So it really works well for us to do a full cycle around it and be fully supportive of how the future is going to grow, and not divide it down into different teams, but make it all one, so that it grows together as one. And then those associates that are supporting it get the same knowledge techniques that they need, so that if you're on my cloud team or you're on my ecom team or you're on the data team, you still speak together all the time. And then they're not separations of states, they're actually positive moments together, so that they're making a big change for how we're being successful and driving things quickly.
I have a follow-on question, but I just want to say thank you for illustrating that not every company has to have a chief data officer and a chief analytics officer. And so I think, because what we've been hearing a lot in the market is, maybe early on you have a combined role, but as you grow, you need to have, very three distinct roles: a CTO, a CIO, a CAO, and a CDO. And I think what you're highlighting is it's that may not be the right fit for everybody. So don't technically listen to what, is out there, but just take that in and absorb it and use that as, is this the right fit for us? Is this the right fit for our culture? Because I think what I've heard from you is not only is it, you guys have a very specific culture that I hear when you answer that really makes this approach work. And that may not be the same for everybody.
I completely agree. And look, as I mentioned, every company is different. But one of the positives I hear from the associates that are at our company today that specifically work, with me, are the positives is that they're feeling the change and they're loving it, right? So for them, if we had a lot of officers above, and they were distinctly only doing one role, they may never have an opportunity to grow into another role that they could be very successful at for not only themselves or the company. And so this has given them an opportunity. Just over the last year, we built a full cloud team. A year ago, we did not have that. I may not have been able to give that opportunity to someone else if we had maybe different sets of states, right? And so it really has worked well for us. It's given a highlight. Our end consumers, yes, they're seeing everything as every other company would see it. And we're getting positive results from that. So I'm sure today, right, this does not work for every company, but I'm very glad today it does for us.
I have a very unique opportunity because of your role and everything that encompasses you, that I can actually ask you a little bit more about your infrastructure. So you've mentioned a lot about moving into the B2C market, which typically entails a lot of data, like a lot of data sets, a lot of data sources. All of that is, the foundational components to really moving into the AR and the, all the things that it sounds like you guys are going to be doing in the future. Can you just highlight a little bit about what infrastructure you guys decided to do to house all that data? Is it cloud? Is it on premise? Like, I think that'd be very interesting to know.
So we're actually a hybrid model for all of that. And the reason why is because we were on-prem, right, fully. And when we started to look at what made sense to go out to cloud, it wasn't an all or nothing deal. It can't be. We're a company that globally, right, has 45 offices, thousands of people. And once you start looking at space to space, you have to look at what's logical and then what those shifts look like. And so if a location was shutting down, right, there's a logic to put that into cloud or to shift it over to something else. Okay? But if those locations aren't shutting down, the question is, okay, what do I have in my data set here? And then what can I start to streamline upward? When an interesting question came around that as we started to make our moves and shifts, and so we were hybrid. When COVID hit, it was, oh, do we panic and move everything out to cloud because now suddenly people aren't on-prem anymore? That could be overhead for them. And then I thought about the model, and we talked to a lot of the IT teams, right? You know, and I sat down with them and I said, well, what do you think our overhead's going to be, right? What do you think we're not going to get once we're home that we get here that we're really going to struggle with? And so we identified certain applications, definitely certain data points that were going to be struggled. And then we actually identified the opposite and said, if I go out to cloud and I have all of this, it's going to struggle. There's really not a great definition today for things. I'll give you a perfect example. Video content. Video content is a big driver for a lot of businesses, right? A lot of imagery, a lot of video content. If you're in any kind of consumer good base, you have a lot of that. That content's heavy, big, terabytes after terabytes after terabytes, right?
Yeah.
And so that isn't always logical to just throw up into a cloud-based environment right away and say, oh yeah, it's all going to work and people will be able to access what they need. And they'll be able to stretch that. There are definitely more planning moments around that type of data than any other that we've had. And the reason is because of that, the use, the needs, the draw against for our B2B businesses and our B2C businesses, and also how large that data is, right? And how long it is. So we actually kept a lot more of that on-prem. Now, we didn't shut down the conversations. We just said, we're going to take a little longer to do planning to get out to the right requirements for it and the right partner platforms for it. And so how do we do that? And so we happen to be, we use a lot of different platforms. We happen to be in a big Microsoft partnership. And so we use Azure as one of our big strategies around that. And so in doing that, we had slowly in 2019, 2020, 2021, and more so in 2021 than ever before, right? Because every year you almost feel like you're doubling when you're getting there. But in 2022, I haven't landscaped the full, I know I want to move some of it, but I haven't landscaped the full way out because I need backup to backup. I need easy resourcing. And so that's just not always the most practical times. So right now, I love my hybrid effect. I think it's very successful. I think everybody has a great purpose for what they're doing. And I think those on-prem support teams that I have are learning cloud to be ready to transform over. And I think we have time to get them all ready as we keep going forward.
So the future landscape approach is more than likely going to stay hybrid for a while.
It is.
Yeah.
I mean, I think for a big company, and look, I'd love to say companies could just do this and everything would change out, right? But there's also costs involved. I mean, a lot of what we do is not just, you know, the efficiencies of being on a premises, right? And whether you're on-prem and you're redundant or whatever that is, right? And you have to be, right? You have to have a secure environment so that you never go down, right? So the one thing you never want to hear is you're never going down. But I got to tell you, I hear cloud going down sometimes, right? You and I both know that. So it's as efficient as you can be. I find, and knock on wood, we've really done well in hybrid. As we keep again landscaping the cloud effect, it's going to be over the next 2, 3, 4 years. I don't have an exact ball to say that because it's really going to depend on how we lift each segment to get there. I've landscaped it for a period of time, but it could shift and change. Another COVID could hit or something, right? So we're all just kind of keeping up with that and saying, if I could be the most efficient and the most cost wise for what I'm doing, then I'm actually doing better service than I could if I just picked one solution and been done with it.
I think anybody who has an AWS or a Microsoft Cloud background perfectly understands the nuances that you've just outlined. Yeah. We are coming towards the end of our time together, and I want to ask you just 2 more questions. One of them is looking forward. So as the Chief Information Officer, you've been in your role for just under 3 years now. Where do you want to go? Where do you want to take this in the future?
Yeah, it's a great question. I just want to take it to the stars. So everybody just come with me, come with me. No, I mean, what I love about the role again that I'm in is because I do get so many touch points. I do get to put in a lot of new technology. So companies that are visionaries, as I've been fortunate to be a part of, are ones that allow you to start landscaping new things. And so what I'd like to see from us is to help our marketing teams and our sales teams and our development teams better, to help them understand how the technology that we could bring into them would help them to perform better, understand the consumers better, and understand the products better. And so I'm looking forward to putting in some new technology around that space. And a lot of that's going to focus on data, right? And getting them the right data for the right purposes.
Right.
Of course, managing the business and keeping everyone else happy, like finance and all, is always a key, right? So, but they're just not as much fun, let's face it, right? So they're great, but they're just not like, hey, go build me that, right? But it's fun. And so the company's actually taken a highlight about wanting to be in front of the consumer more. There's a lot of great things with displays. We do a lot of great work around our Barbary space. And that's one that's really exciting for me as we keep growing, because they are technology forefront individuals. They're artists. And so as you can put technology in front of them, you'll actually drive the rest of the business around that. So things that I've done with divisions will help me drive the rest of divisions. So it's an exciting time. I'm really excited to see how we do displays in the future for shows, interactive displays or things that we're doing, touch points on displays. So all of that will take a lot, and it's neat. And then in the day-to-day operations, just making sure the business is solid and successful is the key to what we do. And of course, secure. As everybody knows today, all you can be is as good as secure that you are. And so we are putting a lot around that front.
No, that's great. And like I said earlier, I'm definitely going to be following this a lot more as a consumer. I was always interested. I don't typically do a lot of hair care, but my girls do. So I have gotten more involved with the hair care products and the other products that Conair has produced over the last couple of years. So the very last question for you today is really about you. I believe you mentioned at one point in an interview that you are the first female Chief Information Officer at Conair.
That's correct. So I am, there's a global officer today who's, working there as well. But I am the first. So there's, Conair's been a great business, and over the years have been mostly men, right? So that's just predominantly a lot of their officers or a lot of their executive team has been. But over the last couple of years, they've opened up for others to really join their staff, and there's been some really strong female leadership in other roles. And so it's exciting to be a part of that.
So as a female leader in the C-suite, specifically within the Chief Information Officer role, do you have any lessons learned or any insights or feedback that you'd like to convey to others who look to follow a similar path?
Yeah, I mean, I think for anyone that's looking to get into any type of technology leadership role, the first and foremost is you're going to make mistakes. Don't cry over them, learn from them, and figure out how to get past them. Because I always say one of the biggest things you can do is make a mistake and then figure out how to not to make that mistake again. The other thing is make sure that while you're going through this journey, it's not easy. Being a female or a male, anyone, it's hard to keep figuring out where you're going to end up, right? And like I said, I still haven't grown up yet, so that's always a fun thing. My next life will be something, right? But to make sure you celebrate little wins. I speak about this often because people forget. They're always going for the ultimate goal, like, oh, I'm going for this and it's going to launch. And it's really difficult to do that in tech, right? Especially in data. So I asked this question recently out at a summit, and I said, how do you guys celebrate little wins? If you're an AI company, little wins are probably very hard to define because there's always big goals. And that's the same thing when you're growing into any space. So make sure you celebrate little wins, and make sure you celebrate those people that are with you that are getting the wins. Do not forget to always say thank you and to recognize everyone that's working with you, because I'm nothing without the team that works for me, right? And works
Yeah.
with me. And so I celebrate all of them as much, and I make sure that they understand how important they are and how much they've done well for us and the business.
I think that's brilliant. Thank you so much. And thank you again for your time. I know this is in the middle of the day for you. I appreciate
No
you
problem.
taking the effort.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. This has been great.